Hey there, global citizens. Welcome back to the Global Talks, your podcast dedicated to uncovering the joys and challenges of global citizens. My name is Josani, and I am with Global Citizen Solutions, a boutique investment migration consultancy, helping expats to find their ideal citizenship by investment program outside their birth country. According to data by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, 89.3 million people worldwide were forcibly displaced at the end of 2021 because of persecution, conflict, violence, human rights violations, or events seriously disturbing public order. There are also millions of people around the world denied the nationality, and as a stateless person, they are often not allowed to get a job. To talk about the scale of the refugee crisis and the demands that we look beyond traditional responses, we will speak to Talent Beyond Boundaries UK and Europe Director Marina Brizar. Talent Beyond Boundaries match skilled refugees with companies in need of their skills. Employers gain valuable talent, and displaced people have a chance to rebuild their careers. And there's more news. The Talent Beyond Boundaries team are opening in Portugal, so there are lots more to cover. Marina, welcome. Great to have you here. But I also want to say that we have in our studios Patricia Casaburi, who is the Managing Director of Global Citizen Solutions. Paulina also joining us, PR responsible for Talent Beyond Boundaries UK. So thank you very much. We're super excited to have you in our podcast and lots to chat.
Very excited to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Fantastic. And Marina, I know you're very busy, so I want to keep you far away from all your appointments. And so I'm just going to dive into this conversation. And I think the best way to start is if you could share a bit of your own experience with displacement and how Talent Beyond Boundaries came into your life. Is that okay?
Yeah, great, of course. Yeah, very happy to share the story. So I was born in Sarajevo in Bosnia. And when I was a child, war broke out. And so I was forced out of the country that I was born in and starting to live in. With my mum and my brothers, we managed to get out in time and stayed with some family in what is now Montenegro. But that became really dangerous because they couldn't host us. It was dangerous for us to stay there. So I ended up spending my childhood in a refugee camp in Croatia. During this time, my dad was stuck in the siege of Sarajevo, and we were separated for about 4 years for the entirety of the war. So for me, childhood was actually quite incredible because, you know, we were received by an incredible community in a resort town on the beach. Just this year, I went back to visit some of the people that helped us out at that time. And it is a beautiful part of the world, but it was just masked and veiled in darkness and sadness and death and persecution, and not knowing whether my family or the rest of our family were okay.
How old were you when that all happened?
Yeah, so I was quite young, so it was between the ages of 2 and 6.
Okay.
So for me, the childhood was a memory of my mum teaching us how to read and do maths. She loves maths, and you know, spending time playing at the beach with my 2 brothers and some friends that we made. But aside from that, there was always this like missing element of safety and security. And in the meantime, my brother got diabetes. He became very sick, and so just feeling like you didn't have options. My parents were very skilled people. My dad was an engineer. During the war, he became an interpreter for the UN. My mum was an economist and ran her own import-export business, but was, you know, doing odd jobs and cleaning while in refugee camp. Once the war finished, we managed to apply to UNHCR, that's the UN Refugee Agency, to be mandated as refugees, and we were ultimately settled in Australia. Hence my Australian twang, I think I'll never lose. So I grew up in Sydney, went to school there, went to university there, and because of my interest in the push and pull factors of migration, on why people move, I became an immigration lawyer. So I practiced immigration for 11 years. And I was always really fascinated by the siloing of managed migration systems. So in many migration systems in the UK, in Australia, in Portugal, you have the skilled migration program, you often have investment migration programs, family and humanitarian, but it's like you can't be, there is no way to cross or make a hybrid sort of modelling of people's experiences. And that's really what displaced candidates need, because very often before the circumstances that put them in displacement, they were skilled people or students or investors or family members. But as soon as there is a crisis, as soon as there is displacement, they're automatically put in the humanitarian cohort. So I was very interested in that. I did a what's called a Churchill Fellowship, and I explored and researched and discovered this notion of displaced talent mobility. So a little bit before that, I was actually approached by Talent Beyond Boundaries in Australia to do their immigration work on this idea that you can be both skilled and displaced. So my interaction started with TBB before my Churchill, and then together with, experts around the world and, guidance from TBB, we came up with this concept of displaced talent mobility, which we're now expanding all over the place. So, very, very fortunate to have moved to the UK in March 2020 to start our UK program. And then early this year, we started a program to expand into Portugal, Belgium and Ireland, as well as increasing the UK presence. So, when you say living the dream, I genuinely have, my passion project is my job. So, it's a wonderful place to be. And it is such a pleasure to have gone full circle from being in a refugee circumstance to now, helping people like my parents would have been in the early 90s.
Yeah. Wow. What an overview. I mean, usually when we interview guests, we ask for an overview, and it's you usually don't get the full circle, and you covered everything. So I'm just going to say a few things I picked here. So your mum was an economist, so I guess that's why she likes to teach you maths in the refugee camp.
Indeed. Yeah. Okay. My brother when he got to Australia actually skipped two grades. So he was supposed to come into year 5. He actually went into year 7 after they tested his maths. And I think that was a very proud moment for my mum.
Fantastic. And are they still in Australia?
Yeah, so I actually said goodbye to my parents yesterday. They came for a visit, but yes, my parents and my older brother are in Sydney, and my younger brother's actually in Toronto. So continuing the global citizenship.
Fantastic. And but I don't want to measure too much the words that I will use now, because you lived in a refugee camp, and then you studied law with a specialization in immigration, and then you started working with Talent Beyond Boundaries. So it's a very good circle of life, but life still goes on. You look very young, so there's a lot more that you can bring to this line of work. But it's remarkable that all happened with one person only. So bringing this life background to Talent Beyond Boundaries, can you give us more on how this is, how it came to you, and when Talent Beyond Boundaries started, an overview of the organization itself, so that our viewers are aware?
Yeah. So thank you so much for those reflections and those remarks. I will say that, Talent Beyond Boundaries, where we are, the strength of us is the strength of our team and everyone that sort of carried this idea from a simple seed of this should be able to be done in 2016 to what we're able to do now, and the sort of platform that we have now to really start affecting change and policy change and systems change, which is really remarkable. So Talent Beyond Boundaries was founded in 2016, simultaneously with a software engineer, businessman, and who turned philanthropist, as well as 2 lawyers in Washington, D.C., quite separately at first. They started looking at sort of their sunset careers, or how they could apply their skills to make a positive change in the world. And they both ended up going to separate UNHCR events where they learnt that there are skilled people in refugee camps, and they both had this aha moment to say, well, why aren't we doing anything about this in particular? So in the US, they got State Department funding under the Obama administration to ask and answer the question, are there skilled people in displacement? We now equivocally know that there are, but that came from the development of a software and a database we call the Talent Catalogue, which is what our work revolves around. And then in the meantime, in Australia, the focus was on, would governments consider having refugees access skilled migration pathways? And so there was the source side of candidates, so the supply of talent, and then the destination side, the demand of talent, being sort of attacked in different parts of the world. The co-founders, John Cameron from Australia, Mary Louise, and Bruce Cohen in the US, got together and created Talent Beyond Boundaries. So the first programs actually started in Canada and Australia. And as I say, I had the real privilege of working on the immigration work in Australia, and after the fellowship, helping to define and input in some of the policy under our now CEO, Steph Cousins. But our team has then expanded globally. So the UK in March 2020, this year we're starting into Europe, and we're also working on opening pathways into the US. So it's a truly global organization, and it's an organization that is really focused on systems change and lasting and sustainable change. Our mandate is to catalyze, graft, and disappear. So we want to make the change that is sustainable. We want to graft it onto partners and processes and ecosystems that already exist, so that we as TBB do not need to be there. It is just a normal, regularized way of considering this untapped, high potential pool of talent that is those, almost 90 million people who are forcibly displaced who are able to work.
Wow, okay. Thanks again for such a thorough explanation. And then I think, but I was speaking to Patricia earlier before we started the podcast, and we wanted to understand, what was that we wanted to understand, Patricia?
Yeah, it would be great to understand the mechanics of how it actually works, because I know that there's a lot of people, us included here, because like I said, when I first met you, we were all a bit in awe of the organization, of you actually personally, about your story. But also, I always find incredible people that actually follow their dreams and do something that makes a difference. And I think that's what TBB is all about. So it would be very great to understand, how does it actually work? How is the process of a company approaching you to coming to get someone actually placed in their new company, new country, everything?
Yeah, great. Thank you again. And